In Harrison Ford's latest, there's a rich white male lawyer on trial. So guess what it's called?
Presumed innocent?
That's right!
Wow!
Yes, but unlike Alex Murdaugh, we actually are rooting for the main character in Presumed Innocent.
Yes, because he's played by legendary actor Harrison Ford.
Yes, but that character still has some unpleasant attributes which muddle the case.
Yes, because he's played by excellent actor Harrison Ford.
Yes, well, clearly this must be the Ford Fiesta!
If you were to remember nothing else as you begin your deliberations, remember Wendell's words. My mommy hurt my head. My mommy hurt my head. My mommy hurt my head.
1, 2, 3!
Welcome to the Ford Fiesta. I'm Adam Witt of Habeas Corpus.
And I'm Paul Precedent.
And joining us later in the show will be actor and friend of the show, Brendan Meyer. Pop quiz, Brendan Meyer, older or younger than the movie Presumed Innocent?
Now wait, he was a child actor who has successfully navigated the waters to be a successful working adult actor on shows like The OA on Netflix. But I think we all remember him as a young goalie in the 2005 TV movie Waking Up Wally, the Walter Gretzky story.
Well, of course you remember that. Of course, Paul.
Yes, but if he's a child actor in that film in 05, okay, he's probably younger than Presumed Innocent.
That's correct, Paul. Brendan Meyer is younger than Presumed Innocent. And Paul, you're older than Presumed Innocent. Coming in at...
Okay, why are we doing this? Let's just say I'm presumed young.
Okay.
Let's get on to what's important. And that would be, what's new in the world of Harrison Ford? With John Wick Chapter 4 having a huge opening weekend, it's important to remember the lead role almost went to Harrison Ford. There's a whole lot of...
out of here.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of news out there now about this because Wick is so big, but the original script had him in a much older man. Ford and Clint Eastwood were both considered to be John Wick at one point.
Yeah, more of an Unforgiven thing, which we're getting in 1923, which is awesome. I cannot believe that Harrison Ford hasn't played this exact type of great, gruffy cowboy role before.
You'll see Cowboys and Aliens. It was 10 plus years ago, but still pretty gruff in that one as well.
Yeah.
1923, of course, taken a little more seriously. Let's not forget Harrison Ford presented the Oscar to Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that led to the legendary reunion of Indiana Jones in Short Round that everybody had a soft heart for.
Jeez. Yeah, not a single cynic in the house. And there's very few things you can find these days that some cynic doesn't come out and go, well, this is stupid, or, oh, Trump is awesome, like even if it's completely off topic, like on Twitter. You're like, we're discussing air conditioning repair, and you're like, yeah, Trump is still president. You're like, all right, so this is Twitter, huh?
Even they took a break. Yeah.
Yeah, even they took a break because the magic of that is undeniable.
And it could have gone two ways. Levels. I mean, that's how great Harrison Ford is. If Spielberg won for Fabelmans, it's what a great moment that is.
Yeah.
Where he gives another Oscar to Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. True. Oh, that's true. Yeah. And I love when they set that up too, like in Schindler's List. You're like, oh, but of course you've said before they've tried to set it up before and it didn't work out, so that it's not like they know, but you're like, well,
they set it up. They kind of set it up for Saving Private Ryan, and even Ford went Shakespeare in Love.
Oh, great. Shakespeare. He should have said it like that. Nobody would have denied him. Oh, great. Shakespeare in Love. Shakespeare in Love beats Saving Private Ryan is the Chariots of Fire beats Raiders moment of its time. I mean, come on.
Yes, but I've seen Shakespeare in Love. I will not see Chariots of Fire.
No. Never going to see it?
I probably won't. Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. This is what I've said about Chariots of Fire. It doesn't come up. Nobody's got it on. It's not on cable. It's not at your video store. Nobody talks about it. It doesn't exist.
Nobody cares. Yeah.
Nobody cares. Shakespeare in Love, I'd say the same thing. Has anybody actually talked about Shakespeare in Love?
Really,
I mean,
no.
It's a lovely movie. I remember liking it. It's a lovely movie, but nobody's mentioned it since, I don't think.
And again, because he's so busy, I usually look for the Daily Mail news or something about Harrison Ford wearing a tight black shirt as he goes shopping for bike parts or something.
Of course.
But
for.
Bill Lawrence is hinting at 3 seasons of Shrinking. Again, always a risk with an 80-year-old guy, but he wants comes back for more. And the finale was excellent for that show. It brought
Still catching up.
the feels as well as all comedy that it has been, with your MVP actually being Ted McGinley. That guy is hilarious on that show.
Yeah, that's very exciting that you say that, because I've only watched 3 episodes, but after the first one, I saw his name in the credits and I was like, Ted McGinley? And then I went back and saw, and I go, oh, obviously that's Ted McGinley, but I just don't recognize like older Ted McGinley. But what a great choice. There's so many of these actors that are out there and not working, and they're awesome. For example, last night, while trying to write the script for this show, I went down a Gary Kroeger hole on Twitter. And Gary Kroeger does a podcast. Remember Gary Kroeger from Saturday Night Live? And more legendarily, he did a sketch comedy show right next to the Second City, and that whole cast got picked up for the 7th season of Saturday Night Live, Eddie Murphy's 2nd season, because there was that kind of the disastrous 6th one. But I was like, oh, Gary Kroeger's still out there. You should be in more stuff. It's like, I loved all the stuff he did on SNL back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, I see that in sports, too. There's some guys sitting at home watching football. It's like, why? Not just Kaepernick, but other guys, too. It's like, yeah, the same thing could be said for actors. Not work. And then that's why someone comes along, they rediscover Keaton, they rediscover Travolta, and they realize why these guys are awesome. So
yeah, McGinley's not going to he's not going to phone it in. It's like he's a pro. That's really cool.
Oh, he's a big smile, half a dimwit, but super funny. He's just great. So all I found for interesting new news about Harrison Ford was, I always asked everybody in our old podcast what their favorite movie of all time was. And I still ask people that in conversation. On the tours, it makes for good conversation, driving people around. Harrison Ford's favorite movie was asked recently, and he said it was To Kill a Mockingbird. That tracks about right. He says it's...
Tracks!
It has a strong moral register, and it's only right that I should find this out while we're talking about his big courtroom thriller.
Yeah, true. And boy, and I keep comparing him to John Wayne, but he's a Gregory Peck, he's a Jimmy Stewart. Like, Harrison Ford has transcended to be what we saw when we were kids as Jimmy Stewart or Gregory Peck or whatever. And you're like, oh, that's that really famous, well-known super actor, and like that's what Harrison Ford is right now. So he's got a total Gregory Peck thing going on too. And we love his morality, and we love, when he's the hero and all that stuff. I mean, that's just pure Gregory Peck as well.
And he said it was impossible to see Gregory Peck act. And that's kind of Harrison Ford as well. When you watch him, he's certainly not acting like Jared Leto is acting.
Right. Too much acting, Jared. Too much acting.
Peck and Ford share that, and that's pretty cool, I think.
That's cool. Wait, 2 points here. One is, it is funny because when we started the podcast, it was basically there was a bit of a joke about it, the fact that we were watching everything from Dead Heat on a Merry-Go-Round to, at that time, we were saying Call of the Wild. And so some of the news we were doing was this sort of Daily Mail stuff. And what's so funny is Harrison Ford is actual news now. And so it's funny that you've run out of no news, which is what the bike stories are. There's no news about Harrison Ford for the time being, because he's big major news. He's in 2 TV shows, a movie coming up. He just made one of the most famous appearances in an Oscars of all time. Of all time, there's no way that doesn't end up in the highlight reel for the rest of time. That is such a moment. So it's cool that no Harrison Ford news is gone for the time being.
And that's good. Give those dopey
give him a rest.
Break.
Yeah. And then when he's not doing anything, we'll check back in with the Daily Mail. And the other thing I want to say, Paul, I have a very distinct memory of when I met you, and outside the Stage Left Theater, and we had that conversation about Harrison Ford, and that's how we were like, we're in the know, because there was no schmodown. You couldn't just go to a group of people and go, well, obviously we all love Harrison Ford, right? It's like, meeting in the wild and going, oh, you like Harrison Ford too? You made a John Book reference in that show. I caught that, And so we're like, well, we should go see a movie together. And the next thing that was opening was The Lost World Jurassic Park at McClurg Court. The entire time we're waiting in the line, opening night, we figured out we loved that together, like, ooh, that Saturday night, opening weekend type of atmosphere. And so I remember that was a gigantic theater. That McClurg Court Theater? I mean, I don't know how many seats were in that thing, but it was huge.
Is it gone?
It is gone. Oh yeah, that's been gone for a while now. Yes, the theater where I saw Anaconda is no more. But
Titanic, Phantom Menace,
Titanic,
The Lost World, yeah.
Anaconda, Volcano, The Lost World. Yeah, that was a big one. Phantom Menace, of course. First re-release, I think, of Star Wars Special Edition. We're in this giant crowd Friday night, and so we're winding down the stairs, and and there's that bottom lobby that you went into, and it filled into the whole lobby or whatever. And we're just having a good conversation, and you and I are getting to know each other and starting to figure out this about movie, and we're making jokes because we're both like in the improv scene or whatever. But I remember as the doors open and we went in there, you turn to me and you go, oh, I haven't asked you, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, did I really?
You did. And it was like, oh, we're about to go in. Not that we wouldn't be sitting and talking or whatever, but I just remember when the doors open, you go, oh, before we go in, what's your favorite movie? And I'm like, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you're like, hey, I'm right. That was such a good moment. I'm like, yep, Raiders of the Lost Ark, twinsies.
Yeah, that's become part of my stand-up routine now, too. I miss the days of DVDs because you can walk into someone's house and immediately judge them. Now they took all that stuff away, all that embarrassing stuff away on a computer. When you could go in and say, midnight run, all right, we're going to hang out.
All right, yeah. You're right. That fingerprint is gone. And I remember there would also be times, too, where I'd be on a date and I'd end up back to her place and you see the minuscule DVD thing and you're like, all of these were gotten in line at the Walgreens. Like, you're like, what? Do you have Tomcats and...
She's all that,
and kicking and screaming or whatever. You're like, okay, can't do that anymore.
Well, one more quick recurring show segment before we get to the recap.
This
date
in
Ford
history.
Just two quick things to point out because we did a lot of news. March 22nd, 1976, it's a little before we're recording this, Star Wars begins shooting. They put that thing, they waited 3 years, but from shooting to finish, you'd think most of the movie would be post. Just done over a year.
Wow.
Before it came out.
That's cool. I have a t-shirt. They make these t-shirts for slates, and the slates are from the first day of shooting, and they put them on t-shirts. Use my Jaws slate, right? Which had the teeth. It's like a teeth flapper. But what's funny is it's not any of the names you recognize because the very first shot of Jaws was sharks. So it's that cinematographer on the thing, it was like the underwater stuff. So you're like, oh, that's not Bill Butler's name on there. Like, no, it's the B-roll unit. So I'm sure Star Wars also has a similar thing of like special effects were trying to get going while they're shooting all the other stuff on set.
I was trying to find out what the first thing of Star Wars was that was shot, and I couldn't find it quickly enough, but I did find out that it's not Ford, because Ford, our next date in Ford history, he arrives on set April 1st. So they shot for 9, 10, math is hard, for 10 days or so until he showed up.
Yeah, I could find out what the very first thing they shot was. I have that 15-pound book hard to pull out of the shelf right now. I'll get back to you on that, Paul.
And apparently Alec Guinness wrote fondly of Harrison Ford and his time working with him on the film.
Oh, that's cool.
So let's get on to the recap of Presumed Innocent.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the story you're about to hear is one of an actor named Harrison Ford. You'll hear how he's minted himself a Hollywood icon by playing two legendary characters beloved to this very day. We've shown that Harrison Ford then did something that poisoned the careers of many interesting actors, trying to make everyone forget what he was known for.
But not only did Mr. Ford prove his ability to hold his own in a drama, thriller, or comedy by turning in 4 performances from 4 auteur-driven films, but could still open a summer movie and put up big box office numbers in these non-fantasy films, and then return to his most famous character without missing a step.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we intend to show in this case is that Harrison Ford is capable of adding not 1, but 2 genres to his career in one movie: a courtroom drama and an erotic thriller, the it genre of the time, as Harrison Ford Phase 3 continues with Alan J. Pakula's adaptation of Scott Turo's best-selling novel Presumed Innocent.
How do you plead?
We're innocent.
Presumed Innocent starts out of the gate with a voiceover from the greatest voice of all time, describing the prosecutor's role in the law over a stark shot of an empty jury box, using Ford's voice for all its power, setting the tone and location of the movie. It's the first time a movie has used Harrison Ford as a voiceover, unless you count Blade Runner.
And who would?
This is bizarre. God damn, this is bizarre.
Then we hear the first notes of the Presumed Innocent theme composed by John Williams, who offers up a slow and sparse piano melody that's perfectly suspenseful and will reappear at every step as this story unfolds, aiding in the storytelling as only he can. So good. So good. There's another thing everybody agrees on. John Williams is awesome. Movies are just literally better with John Williams. Not a single person would argue otherwise.
Presumed Innocent begins with the happy home life of assistant to the DA, Rusty Sabich, and his wife, Barbara. Rusty reveals very quickly a life outside the beautiful, dewy kitchen exchange between him and his wife by holding up a letter on letterhead from Carolyn Polhemus that says, "Stop it. I know it's you."
And quicker than you can say Laura Palmer, Carolyn Polhemus is found raped and murdered in her apartment.
And quicker than you can say Michael Douglas, Rusty's ability to take charge of the investigation is hampered by the fact that he had a brief sexual affair with Carolyn.
You see, Rusty works for Raymond Horgan. Now, Horgan is district attorney, and there's a big election coming up where Horgan will be running against Nico Della Guardia. It also turns out that the acting head of the homicide division has left Horgan to join Della Guardia's campaign.
I object. That's not what this movie's about. Can we get back to Harrison Ford, please?
Sustained. In flashbacks, we learn that Rusty was little help in advancing Carolyn's career, so she dumped him. This is either the film's first unrealistic moment that a woman would dump Harrison Ford, or it sets up just how mercurial Carolyn is, that in her brazen attempt to climb the legal hierarchy, she'd even dump Harrison Ford.
But I submit as evidence the aforementioned note from Carolyn. If it wasn't for the inclusion of that note, we would assume Ford is Jimmy Stewart because he's Harrison Ford and he's here to save the day and get to the bottom of the crime. However, the note has made it so that we cannot fully believe this. Also, Harrison Ford is a dorky haircut and a dorky name. And yet, it's Harrison Ford. He's innocent, right? I mean, right?
Right.
An almost comical series of intertwining motivations are set up around Carolyn Polhemus. We find out why Horgan is extra nervous about the case because he had an affair with Carolyn, and the man he's running against has been tasked with proving that his opponent is the boss of a murderer. This makes the actor playing Horgan, Brian Dennehy, double down on what he does best: gruffness. Find me a killer. Not only that, but a file on a bribery scandal involving local officials has been removed by Carolyn. So was she blackmailing someone? And who was this character in the hospital? And why was he trying to kill Nordberg? And for whom?
I didn't have any proof, but somehow I didn't entirely trust him either. Why was the I Love You not listed in Ludwig's records? And if it was, did he know about it? And if he didn't, who did? And where the hell was I?
It's confirmed that, yes, Rusty had an affair with Carolyn, which put a tremendous strain on his marriage with Barbara. And this series of events within events comes just as they were starting to mend their fragile relationship. Carolyn has come between them again, and now the whole world is about to know, and the affair will again dominate their lives. The frustration is stated perfectly by Barbara.
I don't have this clip, but it's 20,000 attorneys in the downtown area, and they couldn't find one that didn't fuck her. It's just a great line. The movie finally relieves some of our wondering and gives us more flashbacks, filling in all the details of how Rusty and Carolyn came to have an affair. First of all, they look like Harrison Ford and Greta Scacchi. That's going to heat up some body parts. All rise.
They were put on the same case by Horgan and worked closely on a bizarre case where a mother put her child's head in a vice and tightened it.
My mommy hurt my head.
Maybe the kid owed money to Nicky Santoro from Casino. What's weird is the flashback is just showing how Carolyn and Rusty got together, but they go deep enough in the case of the Squozen toddler that I started to wonder if the kid's mother killed Carolyn. The kid is played by Joseph Mazzello, by the way, in his first role, and the urge to squeeze the kid's head in a vice would later be adapted to Alan Grant's motivations in Jurassic Park.
My mommy hurt my head.
And, right as we're hoping that Rusty isn't guilty, a veritable OJ's worth of evidence is revealed by Nico Della Guardia and Tommy Molto, who adds Joe Grafese to this ambrosia salad of character actors. Carpet fibers matching Rusty's house, Rusty's fingerprints on a drinking glass at the crime scene, and also, Rusty tried to bury that evidence. What would a court case be without semen? Oh, so much semen. And whose spooge is it? It's Rusty's. They've got everything but Rusty looking into a security camera holding a bloody knife and going, shh.
Enter Sandy Stern. What's with these names?
Right.
Stern is exactly the type of lawyer character we watch courtroom dramas for. The smooth expert in every aspect of the law who's playing 3D chess with the opposing team's feeble attempts to throw him off, and dashing their case by hanging every misstep and inconsistency around their necks. And what's your dream casting for what I just described? If you said Raul Julia, then you've either seen this movie or just simply have great taste.
Further flashbacks reveal that Carolyn dropped Rusty fairly quickly after their trial together, and that he has become obsessed with her, following her, stalking her, calling her, thus the note. So, in a fun twist, he's Glenn Close, and also seemingly pretty guilty.
Rusty wants to testify, but Sandy tells him not to, and that he should take the Fifth Amendment, which he does, prompting his arrest. But unlike a lot of accused murderers, Rusty is a professional attorney. And after reading Nico and Molto's case, he discovers possible holes in the case and also that amongst the witnesses on their list is Raymond Horgan, who's been informed of Rusty's affair and is desperate to distance himself. And then that goes real bad real quick.
Did somebody say character actor all-you-can-eat buffet? Because we have yet to meet Judge Lauren Little, played by the great Paul Winfield.
Yo, mama.
Again, with the names and alliteration, has anyone ever been named Laren or Rosat? Anyway, Judge Little does not suffer fools lightly. Every gap in Molto and Nico's case that Stern seeks to open is pulled open like a wound. Judge Little finishes the job by needling the prosecution, which makes him a fan favorite in this movie because we're desperately hoping they're wrong and that Harrison Ford is innocent.
But don't get too excited because the judge may also have a tarnished record. No one in this web of secrecy and lies gets out alive. And Carolyn may have slept with the judge too. Was there no one spared in Carolyn's sleeping her way to the top?
Hey, try not to suck any dick on the way through the parking lot.
Raymond Horgan takes the stand and betrays Rusty in seemingly damning testimony, but Stern turns this confident gambit into a mistake, using Horgan's gruffness against him and throwing the B file back in Horgan's face, connecting the bribery file to Horgan, noting that Horgan was compromised by the affair, and building a case that Rusty was framed.
And were you not concerned, sir, in the midst of a nip-and-tuck election campaign about word leaking out that you had secretly given a file that was in Mr. Savich's area of authority to an assistant with no experience in such matters with whom you were sleeping at the time?
May have crossed my mind. Who knows, Mr. Stern? It was not an ideal situation.
Far from it.
I love both of those actors. I can't believe they're both gone, but what a great thing to have on film with those two
amazing.
doing it the way they're doing it. Good luck.
And that whole exchange, too. Horgan comes in like, oh, I've figured this out. And just like the way that those two go back and forth, and you're like, no, he's tearing you down. He's a pretty good attorney. You made a mistake taking the stand. Because they make this whole point earlier, too. Like, taking the stand, that's, Rusty, don't do it. Don't do it. I don't care what you think. And then Horgan's like, oh, I'm taking the stand. You're like, see? It just tore you a new asshole. On top of that, the glass with Rusty's fingerprints on it has disappeared, rendering the prosecution's fingerprint analysis toothless. Detective LaPranzer, a friend of Rusty's who is taken off the case but keeps feeding Rusty info he's gathering on the outside, suggests that leaking some information they have against Lauren Little might get him to drop the case. So that's how LaPranzer plays the game. Then just as quickly he says, never mind. But even Judge Little has a secret?
A coroner is brought in and is torn a second butthole by Sandy Stern, revealing that the coroner was so sloppy as to not even know that Carolyn had a tubal ligation. Her tubes were tied, as they say, and was incapable of conceiving a child. So why would she need a diaphragm and spermicide?
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Let me just say, Jim Downey. Round of applause for Jim Downey.
Oh, did Jim Downey write that?
Wrote and performed that. A rare performance.
Wait, that's Jim Downey?
It is.
It is?
The
I've never
greatest
known that. I've seen that clip forever, and I never knew that was Jim Downey.
Yep.
Oh, how crazy. Wow. Okay. I guess I always thought that Jim Downey looked like, who's the red-haired guy, classic Saturday Night Live writer? I guess I always think the ones I don't know what they look like.
Oh,
who's the red?
Brad Hall?
No. I'm talking like classic writers for...
O'Donohue or Alan Zweibel?
Zweibel. Like, I just think everybody looks like Zweibel if I don't know what their name is. This tears the final hole in the prosecution's case. It collapses immediately. Stern doesn't even have to motion for dismissal. Judge Little knows that's what he's going to do and declares Rusty innocent. No big speech about justice, no big acting moment to win over the audience. Only thing close to that is Judge Little's overdramatic declaration about how this was so terrible to do this to this super innocent man, that it's a disgrace to the court system to have even thought of such a thing. Loving Harrison Ford as we do, it just still doesn't feel right, and we don't know if he's innocent, although we presume.
The victory is so hollow, the immediate cut to 2 glasses of champagne clinking is purely a joke. While celebrating, Rusty identifies the tactic that Sandy employed to swing the case. All the talk of the B file, which Judge Little bristled at and demanded Stern show relevance, was actually connected to Little. The corruption the file covered was Little's. He was, at one time, corrupt, had seen the error of his ways and become a good judge. But the threat, Stern knew, would expedite a judgment of innocence.
A final meeting between Sabich and LaPranzer reveals that LaPranzer was in charge of picking up the drinking glass from evidence. But on his way to pick it up, he was taken off the case because of his friendship with Rusty. So the glass just never made it back, nullifying the fingerprint evidence. Rusty throws the glass in the river, and LaPranzer asks if he did it or not. The answer is not satisfying.
And then suddenly we're back in happy, happy Joyland with Rusty and Barbara, the happy couple, and their child, with John Williams playing Theme from a Perfect Happy Family, as Rusty symbolically mends a fence on his little acre of heaven. It's a fake out, a great fake out, a fake out right before a killer reveal, literally.
Now, for anyone who hasn't seen Presumed Innocent, we're not going to reveal the final twist, but what happens next is so fun, I do want to keep it pure for anyone planning on watching. So, tune out, check back in a minute, but as Rusty reaches for a pry bar, he pulls out a combination crowbar, hammer, and hatchet, and on the hammer, you ready, John Williams, is blood and some hair, the murder weapon, which is the only thing talked about in every courtroom drama and has been overlooked by us by the more realistic version of what happens in the courts the entire movie. Such a great Hitchcock suspense turn. And it isn't even the twist, because Pakula has played the audience like a violin played by Anne-Sophie Mutter with John Williams at the Hollywood Bowl.
Speaking of John Williams, which I could do all day, he goes full Hitchcock and nobody does it better, as Rusty enters a basement full of harsh lighting, making it look like a serial killer's torture dungeon. And after a thrilling 2 minutes wondering where this is going, it pays off in a way you'll have to see for yourself.
And then the movie bookends with another voiceover from the best voice there is. But this time we can't take it at face value. Every word now has a double meaning, and all victories are hollow. Nobody has won this day. So, a 70s movie?
Murder of Carolyn Polhemus remains unsolved. It is a practical impossibility to try two people for the same crime.
And that's Presumed Innocent, everybody. Presumed Innocent. And here to talk about it is an actor who's been seen in Color Out of Space with Nicolas Cage, The Guest with Dan Stevens. A lot of people like him in The Tooth Fairy with Dwayne Johnson, and I like him because he's Canadian. He's also an expatriate of the movie Trivia Schmodown, where we realized that, we could have 80-minute conversations with this guy about movies. So let's do that today. It's Brendan Meyer.
Hey, Brendan Meyer.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. This is great. This is exciting. I mean, this was the one. Adam was like, we're doing this thing, Ford Fiesta. And I was like, I don't know. The first one that came to mind was Presumed Innocent.
It's so
it's
funny.
been under the radar, but it's fun. It's fun to chat about because it's just slightly different than a lot of his other stuff. While also sort of this fits so into, they were making so many movies like this, like in the late 80s and the early 90s, I feel like.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's in kind of the beginning of a trend, I think, because John Grisham wasn't starting to be made yet. So this feels like it's the beginning of a trend.
Yeah, I was also thinking this also weirdly fits in like the vein of like stuff like Fatal Attraction too, like this sort of like
it does.
Yeah, so you're right, but yeah, a lot of the courtroom stuff does kick in. That's more the 90s, right? That it's sort of
Fatal Attraction happens in 87, and it is a lightning bolt. Suddenly, everything is named kind of like that. It's like unlawful consent and sexy time, danger time, or whatever. But even Presumed Innocent has kind of one of those like longer titles.
Yeah, no, now that you mentioned it, Presumed Innocent definitely fits into that. Because there's like Just Cause, that's a little later. But isn't there like there's a movie called that? There's all these different like ones.
We got A Time to Kill coming out soon, yeah.
So I think this fits really nicely in between Fatal Attraction and the upcoming John Grisham, which would be the real explosion, I feel, at least for my generation, of the courtroom thriller. So I just thought that was cool that like Harrison Ford's ticking off two boxes here. Like everybody had to do their Fatal Attraction movie. Madonna had to have one, and everybody had to get in one of these. Harrison Ford's in one of these. And later, when John Grisham takes over, everybody's got to be in one of those, and he's already did that. He did that in 1990. I thought that was so cool for his career to be kind of stuck right here, and he's killing it in both genres.
Adam likes to break up Ford's career at this point into phases, and this movie, Adam, complicates that, doesn't it? How to explain that?
Well, no, it's Last Crusade that complicates.
Oh, right.
Because it's the most famous character of all time. times 2. Indiana Jones, Han Solo. And like any of these actors, he's like, well, I'm going to break away from the thing I'm known. I don't want to get typecast. And that is often a disaster and very disappointing. You know, like Will Ferrell doing, you know, a serious drama about giving away all his stuff on the lawn. I'm like, I don't know. What do I need from that? But here comes Witness, a masterpiece. Here is Mosquito Coast for an actor. I mean, Brendan, you can answer to this. I mean, actually, Brendan, you could really answer to this career trajectory for his, because he goes Witness, Mosquito Coast, Working Girl, Frantic, Working Girl, and then Presumed Innocent, if you take Last Crusade out, because really Last Crusade should come right before Patriot Games. But anyway, in terms of Phase 4. But
well, it sounds to me he's doing the thing. I was just talking with someone about like DiCaprio and Pitt. Like sometimes these guys, when they become big stars, they start checking off directors of the moment, directors who are making the prestige films. And I feel like he starts to do that, right? With Peter Weir, with this with Alan J. Pakula, with Mike Nichols, with there was somebody else too that
Pakula.
Polanski.
Yeah, Polanski is the other one. Yeah, so he starts checking off these people who are highly talked about in the moment. And I think you're seeing that is kind of the phase he's in now, where he's obviously probably looking at the material and what he can do in it, but he's also probably looking to work with directors of a certain track record at this point. It seems to me, if you look at those movies all in a row.
Well, and here's another question I would have for a working actor is, at this point, so as of Star Wars, he can't really craft a script, right? But now he's got power. So, and you can also tell when actors get a hot streak how they're choosing or what their type of thing they're choosing. They used to say every actor, so many movies into their streak, has to choose the savior complex. So like Michael and K-Pax and, you know, like that sort of thing. But he's clearly guiding these scripts in some way that work his strengths, but in very different strengths. I mean, it's just amazing that what he's so confident in that he does full bore in these last 5 movies, and he's got to be guiding that in some way. That's, you know, he's making the choices now, definitely him. And being able to say, no, open that with a monologue or whatever, you know?
Yeah, and he seems to be trying to do some interesting things too with, like, you look at a movie like this without getting into spoilers. The whole crux of the movie is, did he or didn't he? You know, the movie kind of holds that close to the vest. That's what I think so interesting about this film is that there's this murder. He seems to be the prime suspect, and the movie does a really good job. And then by extension, Harrison Ford does a really good job of, he really has to walk that tightrope of the movie holds the cards so close for so long of whether you are watching a murderer get away with it or if something else is going on. If you're watching an innocent man get free or whatever's going on, or if you're going to see an innocent man get convicted, or if you're going to see you know, all those things are so interesting. And so that's kind of an interesting usage of a guy who you're saying has kind of been playing, not maybe like a Michael or a K-Pax, but a hero, right? Like he's been playing these hero types of roles. And Mosquito Coast is also kind of an interesting, morally complicated character. I haven't seen that in a very long time, but I remember it enough to be able to say that much. That's also sort of an interesting thing.
Well, certainly more morally complicated than Han Solo and Indiana Jones. I mean, these are, even though Han Solo's like, I'm in it for the money. You're like, no, I love that guy. He's going to come. And of course he comes back, saves the day, you know.
Yeah, he's playing with the persona of, does Harrison Ford always have to be the hero, even if he is this massive movie star in these movies, you know? And that's kind of fun because, you can't do that in Indiana Jones, right? Like the plot of Indiana Jones' The Last Crusade can't be like, did Indiana murder a woman? Like, no one strangled Ilsa in the night. That would be a very weird, you know, thing for a movie like that to play with, right?
The biggest moral complexity there is, does he seek the Grail for God's glory or for his own? Yeah.
We can't spend the whole movie wondering if Indiana Jones is in fact a, you know,
that almost feels like a mistake they would make in the 70s before they knew how to make sequels and franchises. They were always trying, but you're like, what are you doing? Like, you know, Superman 3, you're like, what are you doing? You know, why do you have Richard Pryor in an unemployment office learning computers? Like, what is happening? You know, I feel like that's the sort of thing you would see a dumber director accidentally do. And like, in the next movie, Indiana Jones, a Nazi is killed in the middle of the night and the Hague trial brings Indiana Jones in.
We hinted at the timeline for this. The year is 1990. Comes out July 27th. So even though it's an off-brand kind of movie for his franchise run that he had before this, it's still a summer movie. Premieres at the Fox Bruin here in L.A. with a budget of $20 million. So that's pretty cool. And I think 7 of it was him. But because it's Harrison Ford, it earns $220 million internationally, 86 domestic. So regardless of whether it's off-brand for his franchise run, he hits. It's a big movie for that summer.
It's a full 4-quadrant movie, though, too. It's like you could go to it this is a perfect date movie. You know, I mean, you might not ask a girl out to Last Crusade. That may not happen, but this one's like, all right, let's go see Presumed
Engage our
Innocent.
minds. I engage my mind. Isn't that sexy? Come with me. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's amazing when you think of a movie and the way that they say movie stars have changed. It's like, this is the era where they always said people would go to the movies and say, one for the Harrison Ford movie, please. Right? Like people were just going.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure they were
Well
intrigued by Presumed Innocent as well. But it's like, this was when it used to be like you'd go and you'd see Harrison Ford. You think, well, Harrison Ford is a summer movie. People were going to be there, like, you know?
The golden age of Premiere Magazine, so you'd have the summer Tom Cruise movie, the summer Harrison Ford movie, the Arnold movie, the Mel Gibson movie, and starting this year, actually 1990 with Pretty Woman, every year thereafter, Julia Roberts movie.
Always.
So yeah, and the Jim Carrey movie would follow soon after that too. But the star-led films, of course, are taking a back seat. Nowadays, it's tough to have them unless you're still Tom Cruise. He's still doing it.
It's led to a lot of ensembles, though.
What were the dates of like Mosquito Coast and Witness and Frantic? Were any of those summer movies as well, or were they a little more Oscar-y?
Witness was February '85.
Oh wow!
I think
I didn't
Mosquito
realize.
Coast
Oh, wow.
was pushing for Oscar nominations, knowing that Witness was so well received. Didn't get them, but I think it was later in the year. Working Girl was Holidays, looking for Oscars, got him, got 5 nominations.
Yeah.
And Frantic was back in March, so there was still sort of mixed confidence about what he could do with a non-action movie.
Oh wow! So this is kind of an interesting zone then, and it hit.
Yeah.
Do you want to know what it opened against?
Sure.
I have that here, but feel free.
Oh, do you?
Oh, yeah. So I know, but please, Adam, tell our audience.
The number 2 movie of the week, July 27th through 29th. Oh, that's a 3-day. This must be the weekend. Oh, weekend. 30th weekend of 1990. Presumed Innocent opens against Ghost.
Oh.
That or Ghost opened the previous week.
I think it opened the previous week, yeah.
And then number 3, Problem Child. That movie made bank. Arachnophobia and Die Hard 2 round out the top 5.
Even 1990 films were still debuting high, then dipping, then coming back again. Like, that doesn't happen much anymore. I think Top Gun Maverick did that. Guardians of the Galaxy did that like 6 or 7 years ago, whenever the first one came out.
Yeah.
More than that. But
it's always exciting when they do it, because you're like, ooh, are they going to go on a run? Is like, you know, are they going to keep battling? Like when Top Gun was doing that, you're like, it's back at number 1. It's always kind of exciting. Titanic.
Yeah. And so, but then Driving Miss Daisy actually made more money than this. So you never know what to expect out of the. In the end, you know, that came out close to the holidays. People probably went, "Oh, my grandma! I'm hanging out with grandma at the holidays. She'll love this." And then off they went. So the whole family could see that one. The whole family wasn't coming to this movie.
That was when winning Best Picture also. I mean, it still helps a little bit, but I feel like that's when they said winning Best Picture would just then they'd play you for another like 3 months, you know, and people would just go if you were at the picture. Yeah, it was a much more big thing.
So, Brendan, what was the first time seeing this? When was that for you? And what was it like? How did you watch it?
I think it was in 2017, so it hasn't been too long. The first time I watched it was only about 5 years ago. I bought a DVD of it at Amoeba Music back when they had the Amoeba had the sort of I mean, they still have it, but here in LA, they had like a huge DVD collection and the location over by where the ArcLight Hollywood was or is.
Yes. The location has changed, but they still have a ton of DVDs. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to go back, actually. But yeah, I watched it on my laptop, actually, on a flight. And I really, really dug it. And again, this is one of those movies that you don't want to watch. You love watching it on bigger screens. And I watched it on a TV at home this time. So it was a little bit bigger. But this one works pretty well. It works pretty well on a laptop, actually, because it's a lot about sort of the momentum of the plot. But I feel like I took in a lot of the artistry of the photography and the directing more this time, probably having a little bit of a wider screen. 2
points about that is at the beginning of this movie. Now we were talking about the entire movie is, did he do it? Did he not do it? The evidence piles up. We are so dropped into his life that we don't know what he did the night before. We have no illusion. He goes into the office, and actually before he goes into the office, he opens up this letter that says, "I know it's you," with her name on it. Yeah, Carolyn Polhemus. And then immediately, so this is the first 5 minutes of the movie, and to a very fake out, happy John Williams theme. When it's Bonnie Bedelia and he in the kitchen, and, you know, they're just one one moment shy of like, throwing the coat over the thing and sticking the bagel into his mouth. And, like, we're so in sync, din, 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 din.
The thing where it's like, he's like, don't eat standing up. And his kid's like, it helps with gravity. And she's like, oh, another lawyer, like it definitely has. I mean, they play it much more grounded than that.
What a family. And John Williams is like,
that energy.
Yeah. And John Williams is like all the sweet parts of Home Alone, it's like it's up here. And, and then what's so funny is that you go, okay, it's John Williams. Obviously he's got range. And you're like, I know this is about a murder. Like he's going to get real dark by the end of this. And he sure enough does go pure Bernard Herrmann by the last scene, which is a really awesome thing. But as soon as he gets to the office, the woman that we saw the name of has been murdered, but we know nothing more. We just think, oh, here's the prosecutor. Of course, he's going to investigate it. Harrison Ford, he's going to save the day. He's this great prosecuting attorney, and he's going to be the hero. And, we're trained, our Harrison Ford mind is trained of like, and at the end of this movie, he's going to punch the guy that did it. But then immediately they start revealing complication after complication and they line those up in the first maybe 6 scenes. All the dominoes that could fall, because it turns out other people had affairs with her and they've got stuff to hide. It's really cool. And you feel so starved from that point of view of like, well, I don't know what happened the night before. And then suddenly you're like, oh, wait, could Harrison Ford be guilty? Nah. But then evidence starts piling up and you go, oh my God, he did it. So it's really fun.
It's one of those fun movies where they do that thing where they, you want to watch it. And you want to think like, well, is Harrison Ford really going to do it? And they do such a good job of introducing things where you're like, well, how are they going to explain that? He must have done it. Because then, they introduce these really, and then sometimes they explain out of them, sometimes they don't. But what were you going to say?
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it was a different story for me. I saw it in the theater, 1990, and I moved to New Jersey for a summer with the promise of, we'll clean rich people's houses, we'll live on the beach, we'll have a great time.
Oh, wow.
The jobs never came through. I ended up at a CVS, and I said, I'm not going to live miserably. At night, I'm going to work at a movie theater. So I did in Stone Harbor and in Wildwood. I actually was cleaning one of the theaters with a leaf blower. By the way, that's a great thing. You just blow everything up to the front and scoop it up. That's neither here nor there. But I remember I remember how things happen sometimes with where or how I saw a movie. That what were you?
Oh yeah.
I remember when your kid was born because blah 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 we were at City Walk and I remember what was playing. Like I just know that kind of stuff. So
I'm totally like that with movies.
Summer '90. That's only summer I was in New Jersey. So I remember Total Recall. I remember Die Hard to Die Harder, and I remember Presumed Innocent playing in the theater at that time. So, yeah, that's a different deal than the small screen. But got there eventually and watched it with Adam just last week for the.
Yeah. My story is I watched it Saturday with Paul, so mine's a little less story.
Yeah. Oh right, you guys might have been. Yeah. Oh wow. So what was it? I mean, without getting into anything. What was your impression then watching it the first time then? Like, was it better than you expected? Was there more there? Was it pretty much what you expected? Or what was the...
No, it was way more than what I expected. I love this filmmaker, by the way. I've seen probably most of his movies at this point. I should probably fill in the last of the gaps of Alan Pakula. So I'm very excited about that. And it's shot by, not Conrad Hall, but...
Gordon Willis.
Gordon Willis. The Conrad Hall of Gordon Willis's. And so I'm excited about that. John Williams is doing the music. I'm excited about that. I already started excited because Harrison Ford is in this movie. Obviously, there are no Raul Julia movies anymore, so I'll take any of those I can get because they aren't making those anymore. So, and Bonnie Bedelia, one of the great highlights of Die Hard, who didn't go on to enough that I've seen at least, is in this movie a couple years after Die Hard. This is the prime spot here for Bonnie Bedelia. This is the Bonnie Bedelia. So that was all really exciting to me. And then the way that Pakula crafted this, and I even read a little blurb from him on it that totally identified what I'd picked out, which is that strict point of view that you only know as much as Rusty knows, except for the big thing he either knows or doesn't know that happened right before the movie starts, right before that great perfect breakfast. I thought that was so fun. And then we'll lead up to it again, but obviously this has a surprise ending, surprise reveal. But what's interesting is how many endings you could think this movie is about to lead up to. I counted 3. I'm like, oh, wait, no. Oh, no, wait, no. Oh, so there's a lot of fun stuff going on in this movie. It's just enjoying intertwining these plots and how everybody has something to hide, something to gain. Everybody was having sex,
Yeah, yes.
I had to repeat this to Paul while we were watching it because I'm like, did I just think of a sketch joke that would be really funny in my head? Or did the judge also have to reveal that he was having sex with Carolyn Polhemus? Which he did, right?
Well, it was, they found out he was. They found out he was, but they
he never revealed it, but yeah. Well,
I thought he had to make an announcement. Maybe that was a sketch part, but he did.
No, he was afraid. I think the idea was he was afraid. He was.
Yeah.
Oh, without spoiling too much, I think the idea was that that was a risk. But it's interesting with what you say about point of view, because I was thinking about how you're right. It is a movie where we only know as much as he knows, except for this big thing.
Yeah.
But then I realized that's what's fascinating about a secret of this magnitude. I committed murder, because in a movie where there's no voiceover or no sort of like weird scene where he talks, you actually can tell a story like that because he's only in scenes with other people. So if he's accused of murder and he's never going to say to anybody that, hey, I did it or whatever, it's such an interesting thing because every scene can be through his perspective. And yet you can feel like you're watching something where he's withholding because, you're right. It wouldn't be possible. Like he could have that locked away. Yeah. And they don't have they have voiceover at the end of the beginning, but they don't have voiceover like, how could this be, But even then, some movies have unreliable narrators too, so that wouldn't even necessarily clinch it.
Yeah, let me bring up some facts about that, because taking it back to the beginning, it is a bestseller by Scott Turow. There was a fight for the rights a year before the book was even published. They end up with Sidney Pollack, and Pakula comes aboard, co-writes with Frank Pearson, and I watch that credit go by without making a bigger deal, because he...
I know the name.
Yeah, he's the writer of Cool Hand Luke, Kapaloo, Dog Day Afternoon, just a little something around.
Right.
But I will say the book had a first-person narrative, so they had to adjust that into the screenplay, an awful lot of plot, and a ton of flashbacks. So they reduced the number of flashbacks so the viewer didn't get too confused. So it was actually a very tricky adaptation to get it into cinematic form. And they changed the ending, too. There's without, again, trying to be spoiler-free, but there's no speech by the wife. Let's just say there's other things happening at the end that lead into another book. So
they did a TV movie sequel to this, which is interesting. Not with Harrison Ford, but years later, there is a sequel.
Yeah, I could tell you about those real quick. The Burden of Proof was the following book, and in that, Sandy Stern, Raul Julia's character, is, I guess, his wife commits suicide, so he has to investigate her past and finds all sorts of stuff and has a whole adventure with that. And that became a TV movie with Hector Elizondo as Sandy Stern. And I think at some point in there he refers to Judge Sabich, so there might be that, but Rusty doesn't show up so much. And then there's a TV film sequel called Innocent. You know how they like to take a movie title and just shrink it down to one word? Chronicles of Riddick. How about the next one we just Riddick? So now this one's just Innocent, and that did star Bill Pullman and Marcia Gay Harden as well. So
you have to bring back the legacy sequel that's just Rusty Sabich, right? It has to be just his name. That'll be the third.
Presumed. You just call it presumed.
Rust. Yeah.
Rust. Yeah. I'm sure if they released a movie with Harrison Ford and it's Rusty and it's just him, people would know exactly. They'd be like, "Oh, it's presumed innocent legacy sequel."
By the way,
instantly.
Rusty is a ridiculous name. Okay, I think we can. I'm sure there's some great Rusties out there, but for Harrison Ford, the streak of having cool names, Rick Deckard, Indiana Jones, it stops on a dime, right?
It's
even
over.
Jack Trainer, Ali
John
Fox,
Book. Yeah.
John Book, Rusty Sabich. Rusty is like the name you give the dork in your teen comedy, right? Is Rusty. Oh, that Rusty. I think SCTV even had a sketch called Oh, That Rusty, which was Martin Short, who started as a child star, but now the show is on its 40th season and he's an adult and they keep treating him like a child. Oh, that Rusty. Anyway, you also look at that last name, you're like, that's not a last name. Is this an anagram? Or not an anagram, but I don't know what the word is for Rusty's a bitch?
That's funny.
I mean, I see Rusty's a bitch.
Rusty's a bitch.
Rusty Sabich. It's interesting when you look at it too, because I was looking on the IMDb trivia and they were saying that he had that Harrison Ford did his hair a certain way to look more nerdy in this film.
Yeah.
I don't think they succeeded on that. I think Harrison Ford is great in the movie. I don't think I thought for a second this was Harrison Ford playing a nerdy, weak. I mean, he's definitely still got all that Harrison Ford star
But you know
power.
what?
But I think they were trying to do that.
But you know what I didn't realize till the end of the movie? And again, the last 5 minutes of this movie, anybody could have done it. It leads you into so many different directions. So I'm not spoiling anything, but he becomes increasingly shot like Norman Bates. And I realized that haircut is pretty Norman Batesy. And now I think if I watched it again, I'd be like, oh, he did it. I mean, you know, because
yeah, there's definitely some moments near the end. Of course, there's a shot in the basement, which that's so Hitchcocky.
Yeah,
you know, it's like some of the stuff.
And that's where
it doesn't necessarily feel that way all the way through, but it does at the end.
And that's where Williams goes full Bernard Herrmann too. We won't tell you if it's a fake out or not, but it's good.
And this is kind of a classic Hitchcock premise. You could see, I mean, he never, you know, I don't know if Hitchcock did a lot of courtroom stuff that I think of, but he did this kind of thing all the time, which was, you know, did he or didn't he, you know,
it
all
is very
these kinds
Hitchcock
of things.
with the evidence stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you were saying as well, you guys were saying earlier, it's like the structure of this is kind of interesting too. I think that's why I liked revisiting it as well, is it doesn't do the thing where it gives you all this information about him and Carolyn and what they were like when she was alive and all this stuff. You do kind of save that for almost the middle section of the movie. And I think that's a really great choice. I think the beginning works so much better because of it. If it had just started with all this stuff and then she dies, and, you know, I just love that.
Right. And you could imagine 100 other filmmakers making exactly that movie. And I'm sure it would work and be fine or interesting, but just what's so withheld is so very clear from the beginning. You're like, this movie's playing a game with me and I'm along for the ride. But it's like from the very beginning, this movie's like, bet you wish you knew this. Okay, on to the next scene. And that's why I was saying part of this works on the airplane, because the first like 5 scenes are 2 people in a diner, 2 people in a hallway, and it's all people, Rusty going, what I assume upon rewatches, down the sort of chain of evidence to see either because he's a good cop or because he did it, you know, like what's going on, you know? So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah. That it was very confined, and I'm like, what is this movie doing? You know?
Yeah. I think Ford was quoted he wanted that buzz cut to leave behind previous, you know, thoughts of who Harrison Ford is when you see this. But one of his good quotes about the role was, "Friends warned me that this was a tough role because Rusty is such a passive interior character. Though Rusty's in every scene, all the action takes place around him. Things happen to him." And that's certainly what you were just talking about, to reinforce that. He saw that in the thing as well. The actors did their thing here. You know, Ford was quoted as going to murder trials with Alan J. Pakula in Detroit. Greta Scacchi, who plays Carolyn Polhemus, the murdered woman, went to a Manhattan sex crimes unit. Raul Julia met with a criminal lawyer. Paul Winfield met with a New York Supreme Court judge, wore a judiciary robe, and observed cases. Wow. So they all got it done. So the authenticity, I think it's all there on the screen as well. Not to mention 3 weeks of rehearsals with the actors, which is a lot, you'd say, Brendan?
That's a play's worth.
Yeah,
that's a lot. I mean, that is a lot for a movie, for sure. I mean, yeah, that is. I mean, some plays genuinely do only 3 weeks and then would do like a week of tech. So I mean, that's pretty much a pretty generous amount of rehearsal for a film. But I think that's great. I think some of the directors of this era did actually value that a lot more. I think you hear stories about that, like a Sidney Lumet and some of these guys of this time. I'm sure Mike Nichols as well, being from theater, like some of these guys who came up through this time, I think did value the rehearsal process. And I think you can see that with this. I mean, I think top to bottom, the performances are really strong. I mean, talking about what you're saying, Raul Julia was one of the big standouts. And one of the things I always remembered, even from the first viewing, was he is just electric in this, and in a really, really fun way. And in a way where, right? What?
He's a stud, right? Standing
he's a stud. Absolutely.
I would want him on my side in his heartbeat. Yeah.
Yes.
Just cold dude.
Well, he does this amazing thing the whole movie where he does not know either if Harrison Ford did it, but he doesn't really seem to care. That's the thing that I think is the most interesting about Raul Julia's character, is he plays it so sort of close to the vest and cool, and you know, you're like, I don't think he really would care either way. Like, and then what that says about everything that's going on. He has no connection, it seems, to Carolyn Polhemus. Maybe the only one has no connection to Carolyn Polhemus that we know.
Well, you know, because he's so confident, and he comes into the court, and look, if you're watching a legal thriller, you want to see the guy that comes up and goes, "So you didn't have this, haha," and wins the day for his client. And we get plenty of those moments, but we don't know if Harrison Ford's guilty. Well, and I want to go back to what you were saying. When they do reveal anything about him and Carolyn Polhemus, the very first thing they reveal, the very first flashback, is when he lays in bed and he's looking at, presumably, Bonnie Bedelia, but all he sees is that time he was laying in bed with Carolyn Polhemus. So that is so literally his point of view, that you're like eyeball to eyeball, and of course she's glowing and showing, that they had the greatest, most dew-soaked life together, and you're like, I don't know if that's how it was, but clearly that's how he's seeing it,
This is a first for Ford as well, with the nudity and the sex scene. I mean, he got nude with Leslie Ann Down, I believe, in Hanover Street, but it wasn't quite the passionate thing that this was on screen.
It wasn't quite the post-Fatal Attraction scene.
Exactly, yeah. It is certainly that. Yeah.
And Rusty is the in the Fatal Attraction scenario, he's the Glenn Close.
Yeah.
Because he gets obsessed with her.
It plays something else. You mentioned John Williams and how he does his thing, but also kind of modifies his thing. When you hear the piano, you're like, this is so good. It's got to be something like John Williams, even though it's not, it's pared down. It's not the French horns and the full London Philharmonic. And then there's like a little noise early. Is this John Carpenter? Like, wait a second. Listen to this. That's a little bit of a departure, I think, to be sort of synthy like that. I haven't heard him do that very often. But that piano's right out of any of his finest little piano moments in other scores.
That theme is wonderful.
On the post for the show today, Mark Anner, who was on our previous show, and obviously, we're big John Williams fans, the two of us. We'll text back and forth clips and stuff all the time. He said this is one of the rare scores that he's just composing for piano. So this is like really, I mean, there's obviously all kinds of orchestration, but it's like it's all piano suites and stuff. I guess I haven't listened to the whole thing, but what a pro, obviously.
I jumped over there when we were in the middle of actor talk, and so let's go back to that for a second, because here are your could have been Rusties. There are two that the internet has coughed up.
Rusty.
Costner turned it down. Okay. Probably would have been good. Yeah. Redford, Pollock shot that down, saying he was a bit too old in 1990. So.
Sick burn.
For what? It's Redford. What are you talking about? I was laughing because I'm like, with Robert Redford, I mean, that's like the whole thing where it's like she doesn't want to be with him anymore. Come on. Like the movie falls apart, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Pakula opted to Ford because of an everyman quality, which I guess that's what we always liked about him and Bruce Willis and other people who aren't the big bruisers like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, is that they're kind of just guys. Indiana Jones obviously seeks trouble, but a lot of times they're the guy where stuff's happened to them in The Fugitive or Die Hard or whatever, and they got to step up.
Yeah, no, and actually, accidentally, by making that joke, I kind of stumbled on to kind of what we were talking about, why this is an interesting subversion for a star of Harrison Ford's power, in that there is this plot line where he's like the Glenn Close, where she's, sleeps him a couple of times, and then it's like, I'm good,
Yeah.
And that is kind of a crazy thing for someone who's in this Redford, Costner. I mean, that's not how those guys are usually operating. So it is a direct swerve that Harrison Ford is trying to pull off the kind of character that you can imagine a woman being like, you know what? I'm good. Thanks. But I'm going to move on to a Brian Dennehy or something. But, it's an interesting, it's an interesting role. I feel like a lot of male stars of the time, or maybe even now, sometimes are perhaps not in the right way, but would be hesitant to be undercut in that way and to be portrayed in that way.
Yeah. Michael Douglas seemed to enjoy it, but
over and over again.
Michael Douglas, yeah.
That Basic Instinct, Disclosure, they got
Disclosure.
And when Redford did it, he was on the other side in Indecent Proposal. He was the guy.
Oh, right, because everybody had to have one of these movies. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Scott Turow, the author, was unsure about Ford's casting, but relented after watching a few of his films. So I guess I've also heard back in the day. I even remember hearing that Rusty was not Harrison Ford, even though you cut the hair, he's still Harrison Ford. He was dumpier, a little less sure of himself body-wise, too. He was not maybe as tall or good-looking or something like that. And so there was a little chatter about, like, can Ford pull this off? And, of course, I think we all thought he did. And in a rogues gallery of supporting cast, we've already touched on a few, but I forgot Brian Dennehy, he was in it until he showed up on screen. I was like, oh, that's right, he's in this. One of the first films you see Joseph Mazzello in, who ends up being
right, yes,
Jurassic Park.
Little kid from Jurassic Park.
Kid from Jurassic Park, yeah.
As flashback courtroom trial. Yeah, and then Jeffrey Wright is in the credits, although I don't remember seeing him. I guess he played an attorney. Yeah.
No, somebody said online, like in an opening scene in the court, like he's just in the audience or something. I'm not sure. I don't think he didn't have a part. I don't think it was an extra, I guess.
But Adam, you got excited when suddenly Bradley Whitford shows up. Your thing, right? This is your new thing.
I've always wanted to start to do a trivia contest, and one of the categories would be Suddenly Whitford, which is movies that suddenly star Bradley Whitford 20 minutes in. Nope is a notable example. If you came in even slightly late to Cabin in the Woods, that's a notable example. Yeah, so Suddenly Whitford. There's another one, too, that I was just like, oh, suddenly Bradley Whitford is in this.
Billy Madison.
Yeah, you could never do what you're doing with the Ford Fiesta for one of those character guys like Bradley Whitford, because it would take your whole life. Like these guys that are churning out like 3 or 4, like 16 roles a year, right? They're like, they're just
the Vincent
like
Schiavelli Fiesta.
Yeah, these guys like even a guy, like Dennehy, or you know what I mean? These guys who are these great character actors, you could not do the Ford Fiesta because you know it's like they're piling up so many movies. They're which is great.
The JT Walsh-a-thon. Yeah, we can't.
Emmett Walsh. Fiesta.
So then some quotes that I like. Boy, we played the opening monologue. The end monologue is even better.
What a great use of his voice, right? I mean, maybe it's the only second time he's ever done voiceover, if you want to count Blade Runner, which I guess we have to. But, it's maybe the second time that this amazing voice has been voiceover. It's awesome. Great opening.
And of course, in Blade Runner, it was such a crap show, with them not wanting it and then it not going well, apparently, and all this. But here, he's great. I love the there was a crime, there was a victim,
right?
There is punishment. Oh, just such a great line to hang there. And all with no score, as you heard in the top of the show. Just beautifully done, I think.
Yeah, it feels like that John Williams score coming in is so chilling with the piano and everything, and is doing all the horror things, but he's just on such a different level that that feeling you're getting from that is just on such a higher level that when that chilling piano comes in.
And my second favorite line has to be, "My mommy hurt my head."
Right. That was weird.
Driving the point home to the jury. My mommy hurt my head.
Right. That was in a flashback to he and Carolyn Polhemus during their, what he felt was their whirlwind. I mean, they did have a little whirlwind thing. Like she enjoyed it for a while before she decided to move on. But when they go to the flashback, they go into a full case that they did. Not long, but that's what's so funny, though, is like, why would they focus on that? It doesn't even thematically. Oh, I guess mommy hurt my head, right? I guess we're, because that's how Carolyn Polhemus gets hurt, right? There's got to be, because he says it 12 times. It's so weird.
Yes. Well, then they have that cut that is so sort of jarring, which is her like laying in the bed. They're having this moment of passion, and then it cuts right to the photo of her sort of like head, beaten in when he's sitting in that gazebo, or not atrium or whatever you would call that extension on a house.
Kind of sucks the air out of the room,
Same with the shots of him looking at the casket and then cutting to an image of her naked in bed next to him.
Right.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's powerful stuff.
Kind of pulling you in. Yeah, there's a level of artistry here that's so great when we talk about Williams and Gordon Willis and just the framing, and there's just that extra little bit of craft on every level in this.
Well, we loved it, and it seems like most everyone agreed out in the world of critics. You got 85% rating on the Dead Vegetablesometer. The biggies liked it. Ebert, Siskel, Schickel, Benson, Travers, Maslin. Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly was like, I want it to be grittier. But, he's got somebody, right? But let's compare this to the Harrison Ford definitive list of essentials, unless anything else to say about this movie?
Well, I did want to say one thing, because earlier we were talking about how this would play while watching it on a plane versus on a big screen. However, I love Gordon Willis, or Conrad Hall.
It was
Gordon Willis shot Presumed Innocent.
Okay, Gordon Willis. I love them both.
Conrad Hall does exist.
I'm sure you love them both. The relevant story here would be one about Gordon Willis.
Well, we've seen courtrooms shot a million different ways, right? I mean, it's one of the most common locations. First of all, every shot in this is quite the masterpiece. I mean, they are some amazing shots, and kept shouting out shots and doing the, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, point at the camera with Paul here. I don't know if that gets annoying, but man, there's some great shots in this. But I've never seen a courtroom shot so well. The shot of the judge on the bench, and there's a second layer and a third layer, and it kind of builds this little pyramid under the flag and the whole thing. That wide shot of the courtroom, I'm just like, how do you find a new way to shoot a courtroom? How do you find the best way to shoot a courtroom after all the courtrooms we've seen shot? And he found it. But there are a lot of amazing compositions in this. And one weird thing that started happening is there's a splat. Everything is subdued, no colors, except for maybe the green marbling behind them in the courtroom. But other than that, we're looking at beige, we're looking at brown, we're looking at bronze, all this sort of stuff. And every once in a while, there's this big splash of red, like a blood drop. Like the books on the table in front of them when they're trying the case are the splash of red. And I started going, am I noticing that, or am I creating that because I noticed it once or twice or whatever? And then they go to this parking garage, and it's this giant shot, cityscape. And then Harrison Ford, and I forget who it is, or like just two people, tiny people at the bottom of the screen, and a huge red car. And the rest of the cars are all like brown and black and stuff. I just thought that was interesting. And the next time I watch it, I'll be like, I'm looking for blood splotches, because I think that was snuck into the frames many times with just a splash of blood against this otherwise dark.
That's cool.
No, the biggest version of that is when Dennehy gets his new job and he's suddenly in the high rise with the city behind him.
Yeah.
And then he's accusing Ford, who is standing in front of a giant red painting, just overtaking him.
Yes.
And that's when he gets his most indignant in the whole movie. His my wife, goddammit, from Frantic. This is when he does it here. He's like, no, he finally yells at Dennehy for like not having belief or faith in him.
Yeah.
And
there's
big red painting behind him. It's
Beautiful
just a red
shot.
painting too. It's like almost
Yeah.
like it just splashes of red, not even a Pollock, not even an image. It's just red.
And then they put the light behind it to light just the shaft and a little bit on either side of that painting, but he's dead in the middle of it. And it's just like this power composition of him in the spot, him in the under the hot lamp, basically.
Yeah, and I love so many of the compositions. I love the scene the first time he really is talking to Carolyn, and maybe the first time he's becoming interested in, and it's over her shoulder, and she's sort of dominating half the frame, and the other half is Harrison. If you remember that shot.
Oh yeah.
And
he's
just kind of
eyeballing her.
he lingers on that. They linger on that, and they never cut back, right? They don't. They really let that scene play, and there's so many wonderful ones. Just because it's cool to think about. I love that one where he and Dennehy are in the elevator too. And they actually take the elevator all the way down, and you can see the city kind of behind them.
That's the whole ride is one single shot.
Yeah, the whole ride is one shot. Yeah, it's just kind of cool. Think about
what is going on in
actors.
that scene?
They really had to get it in. It's sort of like right at the beginning. I think it's Dennehy's just getting worried about the upcoming election and find me a killer sort of vibes.
Yep,
But I don't.
yeah,
There's not going to be an office. I think that's what he says. There's not going to be an office.
All that stuff.
Right. Okay. And so one thing we should explain to anybody who doesn't know, Dennehy's running for office as the prosecuting attorney against, and it's just so funny how it's almost laughable sometimes how much these things intertwine, but the guy that's heading up the case against Rusty is the other guy that's running against Dennehy, right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah.
LaGuardia.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so funny. It's like,
LaGuardia.
wow, that's a tightly wound little basket there. So Dennehy is worried about his chances in the election because now he can be connected to the murdered woman. And this is early. This is before it starts getting like, wait, what's going on? But I love that he's descending in that elevator as he's descending politically, I love that stuff. Oh my God. It's all over this movie. So it's a really, really well, I'm just so happy Harrison Ford's in the middle of another pretty classic movie. It doesn't age badly at all. It's still really good,
Everything Paul Winfield said was entertaining.
Oh,
Mr.
yes.
De La Guardia approached the bed. Like every time he had to call everyone into his quarters.
And I love him.
Gentlemen in my court. And like he was always so upset. It was fun to watch.
Every time they were going into chambers, there is something sort of meant to be kind of funny about. They keep piling into the chambers.
The weird thing he does is keep spanking down the prosecuting team as well. He keeps smacking them down, treating them like little doggies. Who's it? Joe Grafese, the great character actor Joe Grafese. Is that him? Mm-hmm. It's just getting smacked on the knuckles constantly with a bunch of like real stern talking to from him. It's interesting, but you're like, at that point, you're like, well, I hope Harrison Ford is innocent. And I'm like, okay, yeah, be up on those guys. So it's kind of a good audience moment.
Those are great Raul Julia scenes too, because so often the stuff in Chambers, he says nothing, but you can, he says nothing because he's but it's like so wonderful to see Raul Julia. He's just in there in the background of these shots, sort of just like taking it all in, and in the prosecutor getting kind of taken down. But he's so entertaining to watch in those scenes too, even though he's not doing much. He's sort of.
And one more thing about Raul Julia. What's interesting is in a movie with a lot of people that are connecting in a lot of ways that could want each other harm or could be, like who knows who killed her for what political end, because there's so many intertwining. Raul Julia gets away with being a mystery. We never ask who is Raul Julia. We never ask who is this attorney. He comes in as a mystery man while everybody else's lives are being poured out for us, the audience. Everybody starts as a mystery man. In fact, I bet the first image you see of Dennehy is not one of weakness. It's of running for office. I think might be that one where he's raising money or whatever. Everybody's in this like power position, even the home and family, and then they all get torn down. And coming to the rescue is Raul Julia, which we want to come to the rescue because we love Harrison Ford. And he gets away without being analyzed at all. And then at the end reveals a pretty damn big secret we didn't see coming that reveals who he is entirely in like 3 or 4 lines. And you're like, holy shit. Like, I just let him go in the movie because I love Raul Julia. I want Harrison Ford to be innocent. I love a good courtroom turn where the guy's like, aha, but didn't you really mean this? And this, that sort of thing. And he gets away being squeaky clean the entire time. And we never once question his morality, only at the end to realize, oh, he'll do anything to win the case. And, if this guy was innocent, if this guy was guilty, I had a contingency plan. I don't just go in and just do the case stuff. No. I got some stuff on the outside to make sure everybody obeys what I'm doing. You're like, holy crap. I thought that was kind of awesome. I won't go into the specifics, but
this film's a little more cynical about the institution of the courtroom in some ways than some of the later ones where it's a little more like everybody, the judge, the other, like no one is really painted as necessarily on the right side, or that it's a little more gray than some of the later ones we get in the 90s where there is very clearly a good lawyer, and what I mean, even though the movie sort of plays it like you're saying, it's a little more gray than some of the other
heroic
stuff
attorney, right? They're all heroic attorneys in Grisham, right?
I mean I
don't know,
don't want to misspeak, but yeah, most of the time it feels like that there's one that's a little bit more, there's a more of a point of view of a good and a bad side of the case in those usually.
Yeah, right. But we don't know who's framed. We don't know what's going on in this one. It's an unusual courtroom thriller. I'm not an expert on courtroom thrillers, but it certainly felt unusual to me.
Also unusual, only one Harrison Ford point that we could count. We always count the pointing. When we count the punching, 0 punches. This is not a movie where there's going to be punches. But 1 point in the hallway to Tommy Molto. Yeah, I did it. That's so not a ton of points.
Paul, what's the last movie where he did not punch anyone?
Working Girl.
Oh,
so he only had to jump back between after Last Crusade. He made up for it though with 19 punches in Last Crusade. Mostly Nazis, so well done.
It's funny though because he was clearly trying to not do that in this movie, but you definitely could have seen in the scene you're talking about where he is accused. He could have got away with a punch, right? I mean, they could have been like, see, he's violent. I mean, that totally could have been a scene in this movie where he throws one good one and they're like, oh, he's unhinged, and they like use it against him in the case, but they didn't go there.
Oh yeah, you're right. They could have gotten a punch in that way, like he's unhinged, right?
Yeah. They could have done that.
Restrain this man.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's funny is Frantic obviously plays it just as artsy kind of in this one in terms of the storytelling. You don't get what you're expecting in any part of that. That's another slow boiling pot and sort of stuff. But you're like, I just want him to punch a guy because he's so wound tight in that one because he's trying to figure out what's going on, and just getting more frantic. I mean, it's the most appropriately named movie in his canon, I think. But he finally does punch a guy because there's somebody deserving of being punched out there that took his wife in that. We don't know who's deserving of punching in this one, so it seemed like it was going to be slim that we would get one.
I could have punched Dennehy when Dennehy lost faith in him. Could have punched Tommy Molto, who was being a little weasel.
Yeah. Molto is the one that he should have got him, dude. He should have had to pick up his glasses and put them back on, like.
And of course, you shouldn't punch women, but he could have punched Carolyn. Anyway,
could have.
He could have. If stuff came to a head, he was a little kooky.
Yeah,
with the obsession. So when she dumped him, he could have gone.
That's true.
That's
true. When they went into the sort of stalkery thing with Carolyn, it's like, yeah, he could have went up and punched her boyfriend that she was with.
Date, yeah,
her date. Could have got away. You get a punch in there. But no punches. But I like the new game you've created here, Paul, which is in a movie where he doesn't punch anybody. Who could he have punched and why?
Yes.
We might have to do that for Working Girl at some point. We have a show.
Who could he have punched in Apocalypse Now? You got to think about that one.
Who could he punch in Apocalypse Now?
He's not in Vietnam. But
shows up at the end of Apocalypse Now, just like in Star Wars, to punch out Kurtz. Hey, it's that guy that played the tape earlier and dropped the photos. And lit 2 cigarettes.
I thought he abandoned us.
I thought he abandoned us.
Sorry, I had to punch Kurtz in the face.
You're right. Everything he says in that movie.
Up.
I want you to. Brendan, do you know his part in Apocalypse Now?
I do know he's in that opening briefing scene. Yeah, right. He's there at the beginning, right, where they sort of explain the whole thing. Yeah,
right. He has a speech affect, but what's funny is what he's doing is he's having a tough time saying, and then murder that man. Like they're trying to tell him what the mission is. So everything he says is, and then just, good as just go over there and, talk to him. So, everything he's doing. That's the comic version of it.
He has such a fun run in there too. Like the conversation, like he's so fun in that, sort of slippery. And
he is fun.
Like
he
could have a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, he could have punched Hackman easily.
Could have punched Hackman.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absolutely. When they struggle over the the files or whatever, just punched him right there.
So we're stalled out at 87 punches, and we'll see what happens in regarding Henry. Although I'm predicting probably not a punch happening there. Brendan, thanks for joining us. Plug your nonsense. What do you got?
I actually do have a movie coming out on Shudder on March 31st called The Unheard. So that's kind of the next acting thing. And I was in another thing called The Friendship Game, which came out last fall, which is out and about on you can rent it on Apple or wherever you rent things on VOD. It's out there, easy to rent now. So those are the two movie-wise things, acting-wise. And then, just Brendan KJ Meyer on Twitter and Instagram. That's the best way to find me and find what I'm doing. And I directed a short film a few years ago now, and that's up on my YouTube called Delivery, so you can find that. I always love giving that a shout out. But other than that, just kind of
burgeoning director.
And hopefully someday, I can get back there in the director's chair and do some more acting stuff. But I got something coming out on the 31st, and then just living life, watching movies.
What is it like to burgeon? I've never been a burgeoning anything. How's your burgeoning these days? Kind of a burgeoning director, but
because anyone can be burgeoning though, right? Because you don't have to succeed to burgeon, right? You can be burgeoning and then never. So true. We can all be burgeoning something. We could all. Maybe I'm a burgeoning marathon runner.
I'm a burgeoning hang glider. Probably not gonna.
No time frame on that.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, that wraps Presumed Innocent. Next up is Regarding Henry, where Ford plays a rich prick character, gets shot in the head, and becomes regarded. See you next week.